Hello. Welcome back to my video podcast. It's a podcast because you can listen to it, but it's a video too. It's the best of both. All right. What I was talking about last week is this book that I wrote in 2010. So that was 13. What year is it now? Yeah, 13 years ago. And it's basically still completely applicable to running a home-based business. And if you're not familiar with me, my name is Buntin. I have run a home-based business for the last 24 years in various forms. And I used to do wedding cakes. I used to teach people about home-based business when they had wedding cake businesses and cake businesses and that kind of thing. And now I do a lot of Etsy conversation because I sell on Etsy and products online. But I decided to do this instead of just videos because I do Etsy videos, but I wanted to do kind of a home-based business podcast where I would talk about those subjects more. And I thought, it's a good place to start, this book that I wrote, because this is basically the basic advice that people just don't seem to get. And today we're on chapter 2 because there's really only 5 chapters, but chapter 2 is to know who your customer is. Now, this really was not about niching down and finding your customers on Etsy for your products, but it's the same advice. It's very basic, common sense advice that you need to know who you're selling your product to. And I just did a video a couple weeks ago on this channel where I was talking about niching down too far and being aware of the fact that your products might work for more than just one group of people. And a lot of people, when they talk about selling online, they'll say you need to niche down. And if you're not selling to one customer base, if you're selling to everyone, you're selling to no one. And that's not necessarily true. I think that's a very trite statement that it sounds like, ooh, yeah, that makes sense. But a lot of times when you think about your products, more than one group would want them. And there's more than one way to describe them to attract different types of buyers to your shop. And I think when you're talking about products, a lot of times we get so in our own heads about what our perfect customer is going to be and who would want our products. And they're just like me. There's somebody that loves the stuff just as much as I do. That's not necessarily true. It could be, but you might have more than one customer base. And it's really important to know who your customer is. When I started selling wedding cakes, I never wrote up a business plan. I never had like an operating guidebook, and people say, oh, you have to have a business plan. When I started, that was a big thing. You had to have a business plan. No, I never had one. I never sat down and wrote a business plan. I never had a logo. I never had a lot of things that people say you had to have. But I did know that I wanted my customer to be a certain demographic as far as income went, right? And every wedding vendor says, I want the high-end brides. I want the brides who want the big fancy wedding. Well, of course you do. Because everybody wants a customer that wants to spend a lot of money. That's just normal. But most people are not that customer. So what I wanted to do was to target people who are not necessarily the high-end bride, but who were willing to spend a little bit more for a quality wedding cake. And I baked everything from scratch. I never used a cake mix in my life. Well, I have in my life, but I know the difference. I went to culinary school for pastry because I like desserts, but I don't like food so much. So I went to culinary school for pastry and I bake everything from scratch. So that was my selling point. That's what I sold myself to brides, as someone who bakes from scratch and will give you a better tasting cake than someone who bakes from a mix. And that's who came to me. Those were the brides that came to me. So I knew who my customer was. And even if my brides were not always the ones who were having the big fancy weddings, they were willing to spend on their cake. And that's who I wanted to get. So I never really wrote out a business plan. But then again, I was not looking for financing. And you do have to have a business plan if you want to get a business loan. But I was working from home. I didn't need a business loan. I had the cake pans already, right? So I did not need that kind of thing. But I knew in my head who I wanted my customer to be and why I was pitching myself the way that I was. So when you know who your customer is, that kind of informs your marketing. It informs the type of colors that you use in your branding. And I'm not saying that you have to spend a lot of time on, fixating on your branding, because people waste a lot of time like that. But it does matter. If you want to have a high-end customer, your branding has to be high-end. Your shop has to look good. Because if you are trying to attract someone who's going to spend more money, you can't have things look like the flea market when they come to your shop or your website. It just won't work. So let's go back to this book. Know who your customer is. And the first section, don't expect friends to be your best customers. All right. This is, I thought that this was just a normal thing that everybody realized. But doing cakes really illustrated this to me, that people don't know who their customer is, number one, and that they expect their friends to buy cakes from them. And that's not going to happen. And it's a weird double-edged sword when you expect your friends and family to be your customers. Because in general, a lot of people go into business because their friends and family say, oh, you should sell this. This is so cute. You need to set up a store. You definitely should sell this, and so you start hearing all the people that you know and trust tell you, you should start a business. Not everyone is set up to start a business. Not everyone has that in them, and not everyone is going to enjoy it. So just because you have people telling you you should sell this, it doesn't mean that you should. And a lot of times when you hear people saying you should sell this, you then fill that, you finish that sentence in your mind to hear them saying, and I will buy from you. But they're not saying that. Did they say that? No, they did not. And if they did, they're probably lying, because once the rubber hits the road and they really have to pull their wallets out, they're not going to do it. Now, you will always have some friends who are willing to pay full price. They're supportive. They will give you their money. But most people do not have that experience, or they have the experience of friends and family always wanting discounts or free stuff. And this is really common with cakes. So, there were always people who would be posting in the cake forums. And I am going to use cakes as an example because, number one, it's not a product that any of you are probably selling. I don't know, maybe there are some cake decorators here. But it's just a good illustration of how this kind of thing works. Because people want custom cakes, or people want the products that you sell, handmade products, whatever, but they don't want to pay for them. And they think that because you make it, it's easy for you, so why not? You can give me one. And that's not true. And I think people really do know that they're kind of taking advantage of you. And there are some people who are not afraid to take advantage of you, and you probably know who they are. So the first thing that you need to do, if you do decide to set up a business, is to set limits for yourself. And if you have to sit down and write this out on paper, that's fine. You need to sit down and set limits of who are you going to give discounts to and who are you going to give free stuff to. And my rule was, I give free cakes to the people who gave birth to me and the people I gave birth to. And everybody else gets to pay full price. I don't do discounts unless I offer. If I am offering the cake as a gift, then that's my gift. But if someone comes to me and says, can you make me this cake? They get to pay, because that's taking my time. It's taking time away from a paying job that I could be doing, or it's taking my free time, right? So, it could be that I had 2 or 3 wedding cakes and I'm like, okay, well, I can fit something else in this week, but do I want to? I would like to have some free time this week. And if I take this job, or this offer from someone who's saying, can you make me this cake? If they expect me to do that for free, that's my free time. That's nothing that they're giving up. That's my free time. And generally people won't even pay for the ingredients, right? So no, I just set that rule for myself. The people who gave birth to me, which would be my mother, that's one person gave birth to me. And the people that I gave birth to, which would be 2 people, those are my kids. My husband got a birthday cake if I felt like it. And he's happy with that. He doesn't care. I could go buy him a pack of Oreos and he's fine with that. So you have to set rules for yourself about who you're going to give free merchandise to and who is going to get a discount. And if the answer is nobody, that's perfectly fine. If you want to give that as a gift, like I said, that's up to you, but that's your choice. It's not something that somebody comes to you and says, can I have free stuff? Because that's not you giving them a gift. That's them asking for free stuff. All right. So friends and family are generally the worst customers because they'll encourage you to go into business. Yeah, do it, do it. But then, like I said, when the rubber hits the road, they don't want anything that they have to pay for. They're not going to want to pay you what it takes you to make the cake or do the jewelry or whatever you're making. And just put those rules in place for yourself so that you have that answer. And I think, telling people the person that gave birth to me and the person I gave birth to, that is kind of humorous. And so they're like, okay, well, I don't fall in either of those categories, and just no. But there will always be people who are very pushy. Okay, those are not your friends. And it could be a relative. It could be a relative who just doesn't understand boundaries, doesn't respect your boundaries. You have to get used to saying no to people, and you don't need to feel bad for that. And yeah, maybe other people in your family will try to make you feel guilty. And the answer that you can give them is, you are putting me in a really bad position. And if you respected me, you wouldn't give me a hard time for setting limits with this person who is trying to take advantage of me. All right. So you have to be able to stand up for yourself. My Turtle Wins the Race class was the first class that I ever put together, and it deals with this kind of stuff because I think that this is the most difficult thing for a lot of people to handle, the friends and family dynamics when you first start a business. Because like I said, there will always be people who are very supportive, but then there will always be people who want to knock you down for whatever reason. And, family dynamics are weird. You can get siblings and cousins and people that you grew up with in your family who are very jealous, or they have some grievance from years ago that they're still carrying, and you have no idea what that is. It could be anything. But there will always be people in your family or your friends group who just want to knock you down for the reasons that only they know. And it might not have anything to do with you. It's all about them, but they're going to take it out on you, and then you get to deal with it. Be aware of that and be ready for it. And I think that you probably know, if you're honest with yourself, you know who these people are already. Don't hang out with them, and don't be afraid to stand up to them. Because that's just how it is. Some people need to be stood up to, or you could just not hang out with them anymore. You don't have to be around people who are going to be negative like that. I will tell you the story of my one friend who had a friend who was the worst person in the world. And this doesn't have anything to do with the business, but this story it stuck with me because this woman was the worst person in the world. And I was always saying to my friend, why are you friends with her? She doesn't like you. She's nasty. She's mean. She's the worst person in the world. And I told her, she's the worst person in the world. Why are you friends with her? And she would say, oh, we've been friends for a long time, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, she doesn't even like you. She's mean to you. So one day my friend had gone through something very emotionally traumatic. She was over at my apartment crying about it. And the worst person in the world and one of her other friends came over to try to make her feel better. So we're all hanging out, and, the worst person in the world was not caring at all. So something happened. I'm not even going to get into the details, but the worst person in the world was basically just completely ignoring my friend who was all upset, and she was just there to absorb the misery. So about a year later, my friend who had had the horrible experience was now doing a lot better. And she had bought some real estate, and she was renting out the houses. So she was kind of a landlord now, and she was making money that way. So she was in a better position financially. She was doing really well, and she was happy. And the worst person in the world came over to my apartment again. So we're all sitting around, and my friend was saying how great she was doing. And we were going, oh, you're doing so well. We're so happy for you. And the worst person in the world starts crying. And we're like, what is wrong with you? And she said, she's just so happy. And she was not crying in a happy way for her. She was upset that my friend was happy. She's the worst person in the world. Okay. Look, there are people like that. Everybody knows one or two. But if you know that you have someone in your life like that, just be ready for them to try to knock you down, try to tell you that your products are terrible, try to be upset when you're happy. Oh, it's never going to work. You're going to hear these kinds of comments. Just be prepared for it because you know who these people are. All right. And I have had to tell people in my life who just wanted to make fun of me or to just knock down, like insult my business and the whole thing. I just had to lay into one person and just completely tell him off to get him to shut up. And he never said anything again. But that's what you have to do. All right. So just be aware that friends and family are terrible. They can be. Some are very supportive. If you know someone who's very supportive, then hang out with them. Don't hang out with the worst people in the world because you know who they are. Okay. So, this is the kind of thing that is perennial. This is never going to end. It's never going to end. So friends and family are the worst. Let me see. Don't expect friends to be your best customers. They will always want something for free. Make sure that you price your things correctly so that you do find your best customers, because if you have your prices too low, and a lot of people make that mistake. I need to set my prices low because I'm just starting out. Don't do that, because if your work is good enough to sell, it's good enough to charge the correct price for. So set your prices right, because that will attract the right customers. And I think we've kind of moved on from friends and family now. But that will attract the right customers, and then you won't have to raise your prices later. Because if you set your prices too low to begin with, you're going to attract cheap people, and they're going to be very excited to buy from you at a cheap price. And you're going to start working so much at $2 an hour. Again, it's the $3 an hour thing, right? If you're working so much but you're not charging enough, you're going to burn out. You're not going to want to do this anymore. And you're going to have to raise your prices. And every single person in that customer base that you've built who are cheap are going to be mad, and they're not going to buy from you anymore. You want to set your prices correctly to begin with so that you're attracting the right customers who are willing to pay what you have to charge in order to earn a living. So that's setting the prices correctly. All right. Let's see. Questions from people asking. Okay, I'm just going to read from the book. Okay, one of the most annoying things for business owners to read in online forums is questions from people asking how much they should charge for their products. That is true. Okay, because if you go to crowdsource your pricing information, you're going to get a million different answers. Everyone has a different idea of what's a good amount to earn. Depending on where you live, you might need to earn more to have the same standard of living as someone who lives somewhere where it's not as expensive to live. There are way too many factors to go onto an online forum and say, how much would you pay for this? You don't do that. You need to sit down and figure out your pricing yourself, and that way you know how much you need to charge. And don't do that after you've done your product. Figure out your pricing first to see whether it's worth selling that product, because if you're not going to make that much money on it, it might not even be worth doing it. It might be better to go get a job somewhere else where you don't have to have the responsibility of running your own business. And there's no shame in that. Sometimes I would like to go and work as a cashier somewhere, but I'm making more money than I would earn for that, so I don't do that. But there's no shame in getting a job where you're actually getting a wage that is better than you would be if you're charging not enough for your products. All right, so make sure that you are charging enough to begin with. All right, the next section, and I think this is about also not letting people take advantage of you. Don't offer less and then give them more. Okay. And people will ask for more. And if you give it to them, they will take it. And you need, again, to set limits with yourself. So in this situation, let's see. Okay. Remember I said when I wrote this book, I used an imaginary person who is like such a victim. She's such a victim. And in this situation, apparently her friends are complaining that she's charging too much. See, your friends. It's the friends thing. You're charging too much. Why are you charging me full price? I'm your friend. And she's thinking, I've worked with you in a dental office for a week and you don't even know me, but I'm your friend because you want a discount. Okay. Anyway, So it says she's tired of listening to her friends complain and decides that she'll do a tiered pricing system so that they can have an option of a cheaper basket. Because now she's had to raise her prices because her friends are taking advantage of her. So you have the tiered pricing. People start buying the cheaper one, and then you look at that and say, oh, that doesn't look like much. I'll just add a few things to it. And something that Etsy sellers do that kind of makes me nuts is putting a lot of free stuff in every package. Everything that you send on Etsy has a bunch of free stuff. Now, if you are making something and you're adding samples of something else that you make that is like extras, or it's not something that you can sell. And I'm thinking of handmade soap. A lot of handmade soap makers will cut the bars, and they have a little sliver that's too thin to sell individually, so they cut it up to make samples. That makes sense to add that in because you can put a different, flavor. You can put a different fragrance of soap in a package of handmade soap that you have made, and that's like a little sample for people. But if you're just putting stuff in that doesn't make sense, stop doing that. Don't give people more when they're not paying the premium price. Does that make sense? So in this case with the gift basket, so go back to the gift basket example. If you're making gift baskets and you have a cheaper gift basket and a more expensive gift basket, don't look at the cheaper one and say, oh, that's not as nice as this one. Yeah, that's right. It's not as nice as that one because they bought the cheaper one. They had the option to buy the more expensive one, but they chose not to. So what you need to do is make sure that when someone they pay for something, that's what they get. And if you're constantly putting extra stuff in a package, it trains people to think that they're going to get more than what they bought. And then when they buy something from an Etsy seller who doesn't put something free in their box, they're like, I got ripped off. No, you got exactly what you bought. So just think about that. Consider that for yourself. You also have to pay for that free stuff. So unless it's something like extra soap that you can't sell, that you're using for samples, consider, how much are you spending on that free stuff that you could be saving that money and having more profit at the end of the year. So just think about that. But don't, and I used to have people, this was weird to me. I used to have people ask me, can you make the cake less good so I can pay less? Because I don't want to pay as much as you're charging. And so can you just make it worse? Can you make the cake like less detailed? Can you make it less good? And I said, no. Because I know that I can't do that. I can't make a cake that I think looks bad just so somebody can save $20. It's not going to happen. So people can either pay your price or they don't have to, but they don't need to get the product. So don't be fooled by this. Okay, don't be fooled into thinking, yeah, I'm perfectly capable of giving people less than I think is normal, because you're not going to be able to do it and you're not going to get paid for your work. And this goes along with people being cheap. It's like the cheap customers who then are like, I want more. No, no. Just price things the right way and give people what they bought. And that's going to attract the right customer for you because they're going to be happy with the price that they paid, because they got a value that they think is correct. If all you do is go after the bargain hunters, that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. All right, now this says, what about giving discounts? Discounts are fine if you want to work that into your pricing. So for me, you have to limit this. You can't give people 50% discount. And I've seen a lot of people on Etsy give big discounts. And I always think, how can you afford that? Because it's crazy to me. You're going for volume. That's like the Walmart. I'm not making much on it, but I'm going to sell a lot of it and I'm going to make money that way. That's not guaranteed online anymore, on Etsy or on your website. Just price things the right way, but add a little bit extra in so that you can run a sale every now and then and still have a profit that you think is worthwhile. And this also goes for donating to charity. This is something that I mentioned in this section. A lot of people will ask for donations to charities, especially for newer businesses, because they think that you're going to give it to them. Okay. And a lot of people, scammers, will go after people who are newer because it's kind of like they know that newer shops are a little bit more desperate for sales. So they won't necessarily contact shops that have a lot of sales. They'll contact shops that look like they might need some sales, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm running this charity thing and it's going to be good exposure." And we went through this whole thing with cake decorating. It's probably the same thing still going on, where people want you to do an event for exposure or for free publicity. And no, there's the old saying, people die from exposure. No, you don't get anything from that kind of thing. If you want to do a photo shoot for a magazine, or you want to do a charity event, you tell them, this is what I will donate because I will donate to your charity. But don't feel obligated to donate just because someone has a charity that they approach you with. When people who are doing charity fundraisers, they approach a lot of people and they get turned down a lot. So all you have to say is, I'm sorry, but I donate to specific charities, and I've donated my quota for the year, so I'm all tapped out. I can't do anything to help you this time, right? And you could, if it's a charity that you completely don't agree with, say, no, I don't donate to that charity, but good luck with your fundraising. And you never know. I mean, it just depends on who contacts you. But you can always just say, I've exceeded my quota for donations for the year. I'm sorry, but try again next year if it is somebody that you want to work with. Now, if it's somebody that you want to work with, go ahead and donate something to them, but don't expect to get anything from it. Just do it because you agree with the charity. Do it because you want to support them. Never expect to get anything from a donation, because you probably won't. The only thing you get from donating is more requests from donations, because all the people who are going to this charity event are also running charity events themselves for other charities, and they're going around making note of who donated, and they're going to be calling you. And they're going to say, I see that you donated to Susie's little fundraiser over here, and I also run this charity, and would you be interested in donating to ours? And then you just get more requests. All right. So don't feel that you need to donate to charities, and just say that you donate to who, you support, and you're all donated for the year and you're done. And then if you want to donate something, then do that, but never expect to get anything back from it. I never got a bit of referrals from any kind of charity donation I did, and I only donated to people that I wanted to. So just don't do it. Now, if it's a family member, a friend or a family member that comes and they're pestering you, that's more difficult, but you can still say no. And if they start in with blah, 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 you can say, look, you're putting me in a difficult position. I don't have time for a donation right now. I'm very busy. I don't have the funds to fund it. So no, I can't. And just say you're putting me in a difficult position. A lot of times that will disarm people a little bit, unless they're really obnoxious, and they'll just keep coming at you. And in that case, they have no respect for your boundaries or your time, and you don't need to hang out with them. I give you permission to not hang out with these people. Now, this is a good point. I'm reading from this book. It says, another rule to go by is, if I do it for free, I get to decide what you get. Now, this was a very important thing. When I was doing cakes, people would say, can you give me this? Can you give me that? And I would usually say no. But there were times when I said, I will make the cake for the party or whatever. But if that's the situation, I get to decide what you're going to get. Okay. You don't get to tell me what I'm making, because I guarantee you that when you offer to give somebody something, they will ask for the biggest thing that you have, the most expensive, the most time consuming. And that's not fair to you, and it's not fair of them to do, because they're putting you in a difficult position. So the rule should be, if you offer to give something for free, you get to decide what that is. And they say thank you. And if at any point they complain about what you gave them, you never give them anything else. That's it. So you really have to, it's just a matter of figuring out, you have to know who your customer is, and your friends and family are not generally your customers. You have to know what your price point should be, and stick with that, because if you make exceptions and you start lowering your prices and offering too many discounts and charging low prices because you're just starting out, then that's going to bring in the wrong customer base. And then you're going to have a customer base made of people who are not your customers when you raise your prices to where they should be. All right. And, just don't be taken advantage of. Make sure that you have limits for yourself. Make sure that you have, the ability to say no to people. And you have to give yourself permission to say no to people sometimes. And you don't have to be rude. I have a friend who used to do cakes, and her response was, "I'm sorry, it's just not possible for me to do that." You don't have to explain further than that. Why not? It's not possible for me to do that. But blah, 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 blah. It's not possible for me to do that. After you say it 4 times, they might get mad. They might quit asking, but that's fine. If they're going to do that, then they're not your friend. All right. They just want free stuff from you. Now, the other side of this, I will say, and this probably is more germane to cake people than to people with products, is that if you offer something for free and they say no, you cannot be offended. Okay. Don't be offended, because a lot of times with the cake decorators, this was really bad. They would be mad if they weren't asked to do the birthday cake for the little nephew's birthday. My sister didn't ask me to do my nephew's cake. And I'm like, well, maybe she wanted an ice cream cake. Maybe she wanted to do something different. Maybe she didn't want to bother you. Maybe she thought it was too much work, and generally it is. Maybe she just didn't want to support you because she's like that. Whatever reason, she doesn't have to ask you. Nobody has to ask you to do something, because chances are the people that get mad about not being asked are the same ones who will sit at the party and try to get all the attention because they brought the cake to the party. So there's a lot of dynamics that go into being in a family. But if you offer something and someone says no, that's fine. It just means that you don't have as much work to do. So just take the little rest and don't be offended. But also, if someone asks you to do something for free and you don't want to, don't be afraid to say no. It goes both ways. You have to learn the word no. Stand in front of the mirror and practice it. No. Just say no. I just hit the microphone. Sorry. Just say no. And I mean, it's just a hard word for people to say, especially if you're in a situation with friends and family where you don't want to tell them no and disappoint someone. But sometimes you have to. And you have to do it for your own self-preservation and to set limits, because if all you do is give people free stuff, number one, you're never going to have time to make stuff that you get paid for. And number two, they're just going to continue to take advantage of you. And it does become taking advantage. And there are ways that you can get people to stop asking that are a little craftier, but we'll talk about that in another episode. So for now, leave me any questions, and I hope that you enjoyed this. I will do another one for next week, and I will talk to you later.